Commander Zaxvor stepped out of the sleek diplomatic shuttle and immediately felt the uncomfortable pull of Earth's gravity. His 6 limbs tensed against the weight of his chitinous body. The air tasted strange through his breathing slits, too rich in oxygen, too damp. Already he disliked this planet. 2 humans approached across the landing pad. Zaxvor's implanted translator identified the taller one as female, the shorter as male. Both wore identical blue uniforms with rows of colored rectangles that presumably signified something important in their primitive hierarchy. Commander Zaxvor, welcome to West Point Military Academy. I'm Superintendent Carol Winters, said the female, offering her hand in what his cultural briefing had identified as a customary greeting. Zaxvor extended his primary manipulator limb and allowed brief contact, suppressing a shudder at the strange softness of human skin. The Thelicoid hegemony appreciates this opportunity for cultural exchange, Superintendent. This is Senior Cadet Daniel Royce, she continued, gesturing to the younger human. He'll be your guide throughout your visit. The cadet stepped forward. It's an honor to meet you, Commander. I've been studying your species since first contact last year. Zaxvor clicked his mandibles in mild amusement. What could this soft creature possibly understand about the glorious evolutionary perfection of the Thelicoid? Nevertheless, diplomacy required courtesy. I look forward to our exchange of knowledge, Cadet Royce. His 4 eyes scanned the surroundings. The landing pad was situated on a high plateau overlooking a winding river. Stone buildings with sharp angles and symmetrical designs spread across the landscape, connected by paved pathways where humans in various uniforms moved about their business. Your structures, Zaxvor noted, they appear quite ancient by our standards. Superintendent Winters smiled with obvious pride. West Point was established in 1802. We maintain many of our historical buildings alongside modern facilities. Tradition is important here. Zaxvor's translator struggled with the concept. In Thelicoid culture, efficiency was paramount. Old structures were replaced immediately when improved designs became available. The idea of maintaining outdated buildings for tradition seemed wasteful and illogical. I'll show you to your quarters. First, Cadet Royce said. Then we can begin the tour if you're not too tired from your journey. Thelicoids do not experience fatigue as humans do, Zaxvor replied. We can proceed with the full schedule. As they walked, Zaxvor activated his neural recorder, making careful observations of everything around him. This mission had 2 purposes: the public diplomatic exchange the humans knew about, and his private assessment of human military capabilities for the Hegemony High Command. The humans led him to a building they called the Commandant's Guest House, explaining it had been specially modified for his physiological needs. Inside, the room featured a reinforced sleeping platform to accommodate his weight and climate controls, adjusted to match Thelicoid preferences. The attention to detail was unexpected. Is this satisfactory, Commander? Superintendent Winters asked. It is adequate, Zaxvor replied, though in truth the accommodations exceeded his expectations. The hegemony would not have devoted such resources to an alien visitor. After depositing his few belongings, Zaxvor followed Cadet Royce back outside. The tour began with what the cadet called the plain, a large open field where uniformed humans performed synchronized movements in groups. This is our daily parade and drill practice, Royce explained. It builds precision, discipline, and unit cohesion. Zaxvor observed the formations with mild interest. You train your warriors to move in unison even though modern combat rarely requires such formations? It's about more than combat applications, Royce said. It teaches attention to detail and teamwork. Small mistakes are noticed and corrected. The concept seemed inefficient, yet Zaxvor noted how the humans maintained perfect spacing without technological assistance. Perhaps there was some small value in the exercise. The tour continued through various facilities, laboratories with surprisingly advanced simulations, classrooms with antiquated physical books alongside modern data terminals, weapons ranges where cadets practiced with both energy weapons and crude projectile devices. Why maintain training in outdated weapons systems? Zaxvor asked as they observed humans firing chemical-propelled projectiles. We believe in preparing for all scenarios, Royce answered. including those where advanced technology might be compromised or unavailable. The explanation troubled Zaxvor. Thelicoid military doctrine focused exclusively on technological superiority. The idea of preparing for technological failure implied an unsettling flexibility in human military thinking. As evening approached, they entered a large hall filled with humans seated at long tables. The noise level was considerable, with dozens of conversations happening simultaneously. "This is Washington Hall, our dining facility," Royce explained. "Tonight there's a formal dinner to welcome you." Zaxvor was led to a table at the front where several older humans waited. Superintendent Winters made introductions. "Commander, meet our senior faculty, Sergeant Frank Murphy, Combat Tactics Instructor, Dr. Olivia Grant, Professor of Tactical Operations, and Major William Howard, who specializes in psychological warfare training." The alien commander greeted each with diplomatic courtesy while making mental notes. The combat instructor's hands bore evidence of repeated physical trauma, unusual for an advanced species with medical technology. The tactical professor's eyes constantly scanned the room in what appeared to be habitual vigilance. The psychological warfare specialist maintained a completely neutral expression that even Zaxvor's enhanced senses couldn't penetrate. Dinner consisted of specially prepared nutrient compounds for Zaxvor and various cooked organic matter for the humans. The conversation remained superficial. Exchanges about cultural differences, space travel experiences, and carefully generic discussions of military training philosophies. "Tomorrow you'll observe our physical training program," Sergeant Murphy told him between bites of food. "Our cadets begin before sunrise." "Is early rising particularly significant to military performance?" Zaxvor asked. The humans exchanged glances that his translator couldn't interpret. "It builds discipline," Murphy finally said, "and teaches cadets to function effectively even when conditions aren't ideal." As the meal progressed, Zaxvor became increasingly aware that beneath the polite conversation, the humans were assessing him just as carefully as he was studying them. Their questions, while seemingly innocent, often probed for information about thelicoid capabilities and limitations. When the formal dinner concluded, Cadet Royce escorted him back to his quarters. "Rest well, Commander. Morning formation begins at 0530 hours." Alone at last, Zaxvor connected to his secure communication channel and began his first report to the hegemony. Initial assessment of human military training facility. Their methods appear primitive and inefficient by our standards. They maintain outdated traditions and training in obsolete technologies. However, preliminary observation suggests potential adaptability that warrants further study. The humans appear physically fragile, but show concerning signs of psychological complexity. We'll continue observations and provide updated assessment. As he settled onto the sleeping platform, Zaxvor felt a vague discomfort that had nothing to do with Earth's gravity. Something about these humans didn't align with thelicoid understanding of rational military development. He would need to observe more carefully tomorrow. The insistent beeping of Zaxvor's communication device pulled him from his rest cycle. Earth's darkness still filled the room as he activated his bioluminescent patches to check the time. 0500 hours. The humans would be waking soon for their early training rituals. Zaxvor rose from the reinforced sleeping platform and readied himself for the day, applying protective sealant to his exoskeleton joints to guard against Earth's excessive moisture. A soft knock sounded at his door. Cadet Royce stood outside, already dressed in gray, loose-fitting garments. "Good morning, Commander," the young human said with unexpected energy. "I hope you rested well. We'll be observing morning physical training if you're ready." Zaxvor clicked, his mandibles in affirmation. "I require no additional preparation." They walked across the campus grounds, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges. The air temperature was uncomfortably low for the thelicoid, but he adjusted his internal regulators without complaint. Showing discomfort would be inappropriate for a military representative of the hegemony. They arrived at a large open field where hundreds of human cadets stood in formation. Despite the early hour and cold temperature, they wore minimal clothing. short-sleeved tops and shorts that left their limbs exposed to the elements. "Why do they not wear thermal protection?" Zaxvor asked. "PT uniforms are standardized regardless of weather," Royce explained. "It builds tolerance to environmental conditions." Sergeant Murphy appeared, his voice cutting through the dawn air as he ordered the cadets into motion. What followed confused the alien commander. The humans began performing synchronized body movements, lifting their upper limbs, bending at their midpoints, extending their lower limbs in various positions. "These movements serve what combat purpose?" Zaxvor asked. "They prepare the body for strenuous activity and help prevent injury," Royce said. "We call these exercises preparation drills." After these initial movements, the cadets broke into groups and began various activities. Some lifted weighted objects repeatedly, others ran in circles around the field. A third group performed movements where they lifted their entire body weight, using only their upper limbs. Zaxvor's neural recorder captured everything, adding data points to his growing assessment. The physical capabilities of these humans seemed primitive compared to thelicoid biotechnology, which optimized warriors through chemical enhancement and cybernetic augmentation. Yet the dedication with which they pursued these basic physical improvements was noteworthy. As the morning progressed, Zaxvor noticed something unexpected. The cadets who finished their assigned tasks first did not stop to rest. Instead, they helped struggling companions, encouraging them with loud vocalizations, or sometimes physically supporting them. "This behavior," Zaxvor said, pointing to a female cadet who had returned to run alongside a slower male despite having completed her required distance. "Is it mandated by your training protocols?" Royce looked where he pointed. "No, that's voluntary. Cadet Sanchez already finished her 5 miles, but she's pacing Cadet Johnson, who's struggling today. This reduces her recovery efficiency." "Maybe," Royce said with that strange human mouth expression, a smile. "But it builds unit cohesion. No one gets left behind." The concept was alien to thelicoid military philosophy, which prioritized individual excellence and resource efficiency. Weak units were culled, not supported. Later that morning, they observed an obstacle course training session. The course consisted of walls to climb, ditches to cross, ropes to ascend, and narrow passages to navigate. The cadets tackled it in small teams while instructors timed their performance and occasionally created additional challenges by throwing smoke canisters or producing loud noises. One female cadet caught Zaxvor's attention. She fell from a climbing wall, landing hard on her lower limb. The thelicoid expected her to withdraw from the exercise, a rational response to injury. Instead, she rose, tested her weight on the limb, and returned to the wall, scaling it successfully. On her second attempt. "That human is injured," Zaxvor noted. "Why does she continue?" "I should check on her," Royce said, showing the first sign of concern the alien had observed in him. They approached the cadet, who was now helping teammates across a water obstacle despite visibly favoring her uninjured leg. "Cadet Patterson," Royce called. "Are you all right? The commander noticed your fall." The female straightened her posture immediately. "Yes, sir. Just a minor twist. Nothing serious." "You should report to medical if—" Royce began. "After we finish the course, sir," she interrupted, then seemed to realize her breach of protocol. "With respect, I'd prefer to complete the exercise with my team." Royce nodded and they moved away. Zaxvor clicked his mandibles in confusion. She prioritizes group performance over personal injury. This seems counterproductive to warrior longevity. "It might seem that way," Royce acknowledged. "But Cadet Patterson is demonstrating something we value highly, determination and commitment to her unit. She knows her limits. If the injury were truly serious, she would report it." Zaxvor made additional neural notes. This behavior pattern was concerning. Thelicoid battle simulations assumed rational self-preservation instincts among enemy combatants. If humans routinely overrode such instincts, combat algorithms would need significant adjustment. After observing the obstacle training, they proceeded to a different facility, a large building filled with various lifting devices and resistance machines. Here, cadets performed focused strength development exercises. The room smelled strongly of human perspiration, and many cadets emitted vocalizations of pain or effort as they pushed their bodies. "Why do they express vocally during exertion?" HFY asked, noting the loud grunts and shouts. "It helps with maximum effort," Royce explained, "and sometimes it's just a release of frustration or determination." Most perplexing to the commander was how the humans interacted during rest periods. They engaged in physical contact, slapping each other's backs, grasping shoulders, even engaging in mock combat behaviors. And they displayed facial expressions that his translator identified as smiles and laughter, signs of pleasure or amusement. "Your warriors appear to be enjoying their suffering," HFY observed. Royce considered this. "I guess we do, in a way. There's satisfaction in pushing your limits, and shared hardship builds stronger bonds than shared comfort." The statement disturbed HFY deeply. He made a priority flag in his neural recording. This psychological trait, finding cohesion through voluntary hardship, had significant military implications that the hegemony must understand. Their final stop was a combat training facility where cadets practiced hand-to-hand fighting techniques. Paired in groups, they took turns striking and restraining each other. The controlled violence was expected, but again, the emotional responses were not. Despite inflicting and receiving pain, the humans maintained positive social interactions, often helping opponents improve techniques that had just been used against them. When they finally returned to the commander's quarters for a midday meal break, HFY immediately sent an update to the hegemony. "Human physical capabilities appear limited compared to our enhanced warriors, but their psychological responses to physical stress do not follow expected patterns. They deliberately seek discomfort, find social reinforcement in shared suffering, and demonstrate concerning disregard for individual self-preservation when group objectives are prioritized. Recommend comprehensive reassessment of human threat classification and combat protocols." HFY paused his recording, mandibles clicking rapidly, the thylakoid equivalent of deep thought. Something about these humans disturbed him more than he cared to admit. They seemed almost primitive in their methods, yet there was a psychological complexity to their approach that defied his species' understanding of rational military development. And this was only the second day of his visit. After the midday meal, Cadet Royce led Commander HFY to a different part of the academy, a large building with multiple classrooms. The alien was secretly relieved to be moving away from physical training observations. Today's schedule promised something more familiar: tactical education and military history classes. Surely here, in the realm of strategy and planning, humans would display the logical approaches that all advanced civilizations shared. "This afternoon you'll observe how we teach military theory and history," Royce explained as they walked. "First with Professor Grant, then we'll visit the historical archives." They entered a classroom where about 20 cadets sat in rows facing a large display screen. Dr. Grant nodded to acknowledge their entrance and motioned them to empty seats at the back. HFY settled his multiple limbs carefully on the reinforced chair provided for him. "Today we continue our analysis of asymmetric advantage," Dr. Grant announced. "Who can summarize what we discussed last session?" A male cadet raised his hand. "Asymmetric advantage occurs when combatants exploit unconventional methods to overcome superior enemy forces, ma'am." "Correct, Cadet Miller. And our historical case study for today is the Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BCE. The screen displayed images of ancient humans in rudimentary armor facing a much larger force. As Dr. Grant explained the battle, HFY became increasingly uncomfortable. She described how a small force of Greek warriors had deliberately chosen unfavorable terrain to engage a much larger Persian army, fighting to their deaths rather than retreating. But the battle resulted in their elimination, HFY said, unable to remain silent. "By your own account, these Spartans were defeated." The room went quiet as all faces turned to him. Dr. Grant smiled. "An excellent observation, Commander. By conventional metrics, yes, the Spartans lost, but their sacrifice delayed the Persian advance, allowing Greek cities to prepare defenses and inspired resistance. Sometimes victory isn't measured by survival." HFY's mandibles clicked rapidly. "This defies military logic. The purpose of combat is to achieve objectives while preserving forces for future operations. That's one philosophy, Dr. Grant acknowledged. But human military history provides countless examples where apparent defeat served a larger strategic purpose. The class continued with discussions of other historical battles. In each case, Zaxvor noted with growing concern how the professor praised what he considered irrational decisions, forces fighting beyond reasonable hope of victory, leaders taking enormous risks when safe alternatives existed, soldiers enduring, conditions that could have been avoided through surrender. When the class ended, Cadet Royce guided him to another building. Now we'll visit the history archives. You requested access to study our military development. The archives consisted of a large room filled with display cases, digital terminals, and actual physical books. An older human with gray hair greeted them. Commander, welcome to our historical collections. I'm Dr. Harris, the Academy historian. Feel free to explore, and I'm available if you have questions. For the next 2 hours, Zaxvor immersed himself in human military history. He studied conflicts spanning thousands of years, from primitive battles with simple tools to modern engagements with advanced weapons. What disturbed him most was not the technology, but the consistent psychological patterns. Throughout their history, humans displayed both shocking cruelty and extraordinary self-sacrifice, often in the same conflicts. He read accounts of soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save companions, of outnumbered forces fighting to the last individual rather than accepting logical terms of surrender, of resistance fighters continuing operations despite overwhelming enemy superiority. Thelicoid military doctrine, such behaviors were incomprehensible. Their warriors fought according to strict efficiency calculations. When victory became statistically improbable beyond a certain threshold, withdrawal or surrender was the only logical choice. The hegemony would never waste resources on lost causes or symbolic stands. Zaxvor paused at a display about guerrilla warfare tactics. These methods seem dishonorable, he commented to Dr. Harris, who had approached. Asymmetric warfare often looks that way to conventional forces, the historian replied. But when facing a stronger enemy, unconventional methods may be the only option. Humans have a long history of adapting to overcome superior forces. Later, Zaxvor met with a cadet who had been assigned to discuss historical perspectives with him. The young human introduced himself as Samuel Rivera. My grandfather fought in the Pan-Asian conflict, Cadet Rivera explained without prompting. He was part of a resistance cell in occupied territory for 3 years. Their unit was cut off from command, but they continued operations anyway. Without orders or support? Zaxvor asked. Why not surrender and preserve lives? The cadet looked genuinely confused by the question. Surrender wasn't an option they considered. They believed in what they were fighting for. But statistically, their efforts could not have significantly impacted the larger conflict. Maybe not directly, Rivera acknowledged. But every enemy convoy they disrupted, every communication they intercepted, contributed to the eventual victory. And the local civilians knew someone was still fighting for them. That matters. Zaxvor's neural recorder flagged this conversation as highly significant. The human's explanation revealed a fundamentally different understanding of military purpose than the thelicoid perspective. For this cadet, symbolic resistance held value beyond measurable tactical impact. After leaving the archives, Zaxvor requested time alone in his quarters before the evening meal. Once sealed inside, he immediately began a priority report to the hegemony. Analysis of human military education reveals deeply concerning patterns. Humans do not follow predictable military logic. They romanticize lost causes and celebrate warriors who fight beyond rational points of surrender. Their historical records are filled with examples of forces achieving victory through methods that defy conventional military doctrine. He paused, considering how to express his growing unease in terms his superiors would understand. Most concerning is their concept of asymmetric advantage, an approach to warfare that specifically targets conventional military weaknesses. Humans do not accept defeat when probability indicates they should. Instead, they adapt tactics, employ unconventional methods, and continue resistance beyond rational thresholds. HFY added a final assessment. Preliminary recommendation. Thelicoid military doctrine must be revised regarding potential human conflict. Standard approaches would likely fail against a species that does not calculate combat decisions using our logical frameworks. Humans may prove dangerous precisely because they do not follow predictable cost-benefit analyses in combat situations. He ended the transmission and remained motionless for several minutes, his exoskeleton cooling as he processed the implications of today's observations. The humans had initially seemed primitive with their physical training and ancient traditions. Now he understood those elements differently, not as weaknesses but as components of a military philosophy alien to thelicoid understanding. The thought disturbed him deeply. The hegemony had encountered and subjugated 17 different species in its expansion. All had eventually surrendered when defeat became mathematically inevitable. The humans, with their celebration of last stands and desperate measures, might not follow this pattern. For the first time in his distinguished military career, Commander HFY experienced an unfamiliar sensation as he prepared to rejoin the humans for the evening meal, a creeping doubt about the hegemony's military superiority. The fourth day of Commander HFY's visit began with a change in schedule. Instead of meeting in the main campus area, Cadet Royce led him to a remote facility at the edge of the academy grounds. "Today we observe psychological training," Royce explained as they walked. "Major Howard oversees these exercises." They approached a plain building with few windows. HFY noted security measures more extensive than at other academy locations: multiple checkpoints, identification scanners, and armed guards. "Why increase security for psychological training?" the commander asked. "These exercises can be intense," Royce replied. "We limit access to maintain the training environment and protect the cadets' privacy." Inside, Major Howard met them in a small conference room. The human's expression remained unreadable just as it had during their first meeting. "Commander, today you'll observe how we prepare cadets mentally for battlefield situations," Howard said. "I must ask that you remain silent during exercises unless I indicate otherwise. Some scenarios require complete immersion." HFY agreed, activating his neural recorder at maximum sensitivity. If humans conducted specialized psychological training, the hegemony needed detailed information. The first observation area overlooked a large room divided into several small cells. In each cell, a cadet sat alone in dim lighting. Howard explained the exercise. "This is sensory management training. Cadets spend varying periods in controlled isolation to develop resilience against captivity situations." HFY watched the isolated humans carefully. Some sat completely still. Others performed repetitive movements, tapping fingers, rocking slightly, or whispering to themselves. "How long do they remain isolated?" he asked. "Variable durations," Howard replied. "Some just 4 hours, others up to 72. They don't know in advance how long their session will last." The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly in surprise. 72 hours of isolation is considered torture under interstellar conventions. Howard's expression remained neutral. "This is voluntary training, not punishment, and 72 hours is far less than what captured personnel might face in actual captivity. We provide them techniques to maintain mental stability during isolation." They moved to another observation room. Below, a group of cadets worked frantically to extract lifelike human replicas from a simulated collapsed building. Artificial smoke filled the chamber, while recorded sounds of explosions and screams played at high volume. "Crisis response training," Howard explained. "The scenario simulates a bombing with multiple casualties. Teams must make rapid triage decisions under stress." As HFY watched, a supervisor announced through speakers, "Additional structural collapse in Sector 3. 4 team members are now considered casualties." The commander expected the exercise to end. In thelicoid training, scenarios terminated once losses exceeded acceptable parameters. Instead, the remaining humans adjusted their approach, working faster with visible intensity despite their reduced numbers. Why continue after sustaining significant casualties? HFY asked. The mission success probability is greatly reduced. Because in real situations, you don't get to stop when things go badly, Howard said simply. You adapt and continue the mission with available resources. The next area contained what Howard called stress inoculation chambers. Individual cadets faced personalized scenarios designed to trigger specific psychological responses: fear, anger, panic, or grief. Monitoring equipment recorded their physiological reactions while instructors observed their coping methods. We deliberately expose them to controlled psychological distress, Howard explained. Repeated exposure under safe conditions builds resistance when they face similar stressors in actual combat. HFY observed a female cadet inside one chamber. Virtual reality equipment created an immersive scenario where she appeared to be treating a severely wounded comrade while under enemy fire. The wounds on the virtual human were detailed enough that even HFY found the images disturbing. The cadet knows this is simulated? He asked. Of course, Howard replied. But effective training requires emotional investment. Note her breathing, and focus despite the graphic stimuli. Indeed, the human female maintained remarkable composure, her movements precise despite the chaotic scenario. Later, they observed a hostage rescue simulation. Cadets playing both captors and hostages enacted a complex scenario. The team attempting rescue faced multiple setbacks: faulty intelligence, equipment failures, and unexpected resistance. After the exercise concluded, Howard introduced HFY to one of the participants, Cadet Lauren Bailey. The commander immediately questioned her decision-making. Your team continued the operation despite losing access to your primary weapons and having 2 team members eliminated. Withdrawal would have been logical at that point. Why persist? The cadet looked confused by his question. Because there were still people we could save, sir. But the statistical probability of mission success had dropped below acceptable parameters. With respect, Commander, humans don't abandon others just because rescue becomes difficult, she replied. We adapt and find another way. Even at risk to more personnel? HFY pressed. Those are decisions every leader faces, she acknowledged. But giving up guarantees failure. At least by continuing, we had a chance. The exchange deeply troubled HFY. In Thelicoid military operations, decisions were based entirely on mathematical probability and resource preservation. The human approach, continuing despite diminishing chances of success, defied logical analysis. After leaving the psychological training facility, HFY requested time to process his observations before the next scheduled activity. Alone in a small office, he immediately transmitted another encrypted message to the Hegemony High Command. Priority assessment. Human psychological training reveals critical vulnerabilities in our strategic planning. Standard psychological warfare tactics would likely strengthen rather than weaken human resolve. They deliberately expose their warriors to conditions we would consider damaging: isolation, simulated trauma, perceived failure, to build resistance against these very tactics. He added detailed observations about the hostage scenario and the humans' responses to simulated casualties. Most concerning aspect: humans do not abandon objectives when success probability decreases below rational thresholds. They appear to place irrational value on saving even small numbers of their kind, potentially sacrificing additional resources for minimal strategic gain. This behavior makes their responses in conflict scenarios highly unpredictable by Thelicoid standards. He concluded with a formal recommendation. Strongly advise against conventional psychological operations if conflict with humans occurs. Their training specifically prepares them to resist and even become more determined when facing adversity. Recommended alternative: diplomatic resolution of any potential conflicts. These humans do not think like rational beings in military contexts. HFY ended the transmission and sat motionless, his exoskeleton cooling as his 4 eyes stared at nothing in particular. The humans continued to disturb him in ways he struggled to define. Their military training seemed designed not just to create efficient warriors, but to produce individuals who would continue fighting long after Thelicoid algorithms would calculate surrender as the only logical option. When Cadet Royce returned, to escort him to the next activity, Zaxvor studied the young human with new awareness. This cheerful guide, who had seemed so harmless on the first day, had been shaped by the very training he had observed. Behind the polite exterior was a being trained to endure conditions that would break thylakoid warriors, and to do so willingly, even finding value in the process. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Commander Zaxvor felt something he had never experienced during first contact with any other species: genuine fear. The fifth and final day of Commander Zaxvor's visit to West Point began with the sound of ceremonial cannon fire. The sharp report echoed across the campus, startling the thylakoid as he prepared for his last series of observations. Today's schedule included graduation ceremonies and a private meeting with Superintendent Winters before his departure. Cadet Royce arrived to escort him, wearing a formal uniform different from previous days: crisp white fabric with gold buttons and blue trim. "Good morning, Commander. Today is special for the Academy. The senior class graduates and receives their commissions as officers." They walked to a large open field where rows of chairs faced a raised platform. Hundreds of humans in various uniforms and civilian clothes gathered, talking excitedly. Royce led Zaxvor to a reserved section near the front for distinguished visitors. "These rituals hold significance beyond practical function?" Zaxvor asked as they waited. "Absolutely," Royce replied. "Graduation represents the culmination of years of training, but also connects new officers to generations of those who came before them. Some cadets are continuing family traditions going back centuries." The ceremony began with music from a human band playing wind and percussion instruments. Zaxvor observed how the sounds created visible emotional responses in the audience. Some smiled, others displayed watery eyes that his translator identified as signs of strong sentiment. The graduating cadets marched onto the field in perfect formation, their movements synchronized with the precision he had observed throughout his visit. Their young faces showed pride, excitement, and determination as they took their positions. Superintendent Winters spoke about duty, honor, and service. She referenced historical battles and fallen warriors from previous generations. Most disturbing to Zaxvor was how she framed military service not as a functional career, but as a sacred commitment to protect others, even at the cost of one's life. "The willingness to sacrifice for your fellow citizens is what separates the warrior from the merely capable," she told the graduates. "You have proven yourselves worthy of this sacred trust." As he watched the ceremony continue, Zaxvor's neural recorder flagged connections between all his previous observations. The physical training that emphasized group success over individual comfort. The tactical education that celebrated resistance against overwhelming odds. The psychological conditioning that prepared humans to endure rather than surrender. All these elements combined in these young warriors, who now took solemn oaths to defend their territory and people. One by one, the graduates received their commissions, transforming from cadets to officers. Family members joined them to attach new rank insignia to their uniforms, parents, siblings, and mates participating in this transition ritual. After the ceremony concluded, Zaxvor was escorted to Superintendent Winters' office for their final meeting. The human officer welcomed him with the same polite demeanor as on his first day, but he now perceived her differently. Not just as an administrator, but as a shaper of warriors with troubling capabilities. "I hope your observations have been informative, Commander," she said once they were seated. "Do you have final questions before your departure?" Zaxvor considered carefully. "Your training methods are quite different from ours. I am curious about your ethical constraints. What limits do humans place on warfare?" "An excellent question," she replied. "We operate under both international laws and our own code of conduct. We train to fight effectively but also to show restraint, protect civilians, and treat prisoners humanely. Victory at any cost is not our philosophy. And if an enemy does not follow such constraints, we maintain our standards regardless," she said firmly. "Compromising our ethics might bring tactical advantage but strategic failure. We believe how we fight reflects who we are as a people. Zaxvor found her answer both reassuring and deeply concerning. The ethical limitations might reduce human military effectiveness, yet their commitment to principles despite disadvantage suggested a psychological resilience that transcended logical military calculation. After the meeting, Zaxvor's final, scheduled observation was a demonstration organized for visiting dignitaries. On a training field, a group of cadets performed a rescue operation simulation. The scenario involved extracting injured personnel from hostile territory with limited resources. The commander watched with new understanding as the young humans demonstrated coordination, sacrifice, and improvisation. Each moved with purpose, communicating through small gestures and abbreviated verbal codes. When complications were introduced, equipment failures, unexpected obstacles, they adapted instantly without visible distress. Most disturbing to Zaxvor was their evident enjoyment of the challenge. These humans didn't endure hardship with grim determination. They embraced it with enthusiasm, sometimes even showing those facial expressions his translator identified as smiles during the most difficult portions of the exercise. As the demonstration concluded, Cadet Royce approached with a small object in his hand. "Commander, before you depart, we have a tradition of presenting guests with a token of their visit." He offered a small metal disc. "This is a challenge coin bearing our academy motto. It represents the bond shared by all who graduate from this institution." Zaxvor accepted the coin with formal courtesy, examining the engraved metal. The words "Duty, Honor, Country" circled an image of the stone buildings he had first seen upon arrival. "I am honored by this tradition," he said, carefully placing the coin in a secure compartment of his exoskeleton. The time for departure arrived. A formal escort accompanied Zaxvor to his shuttle, with Superintendent Winters and several senior officers present to bid him farewell. The formalities were brief but respectful. As his shuttle rose through Earth's atmosphere, Commander Zaxvor began his final and most important transmission to the Hegemony High Command. Complete assessment of human military capabilities. Previous reports have detailed specific concerns regarding physical training, tactical doctrine, and psychological conditioning. This final report provides my comprehensive recommendation regarding potential conflict with humans. He paused, organizing his thoughts carefully. Humans are not merely another spacefaring species to be catalogued and potentially subjugated. They represent a fundamental threat to the hegemony's understanding of controlled warfare. Their warriors are conditioned from early development to resist standard suppression tactics. Their military traditions celebrate continued resistance, when our forces would calculate surrender as the only logical option. His manipulator limbs trembled slightly as he composed the most important recommendation of his career. Highest priority directive. Avoid conflict with humans at all costs. Their approach to warfare does not follow rational constraints that govern civilized species. They find unity in hardship, purpose in sacrifice, and continue fighting long after resource calculation indicates defeat. Standard hegemony conquest protocols would likely fail against humans, resulting in prolonged conflict with unpredictable outcomes. He added a personal note, something he had never done in an official report. "I have observed many species in my career, but none have disturbed me as deeply as humans. They are dangerous not because of superior technology or resources, but because they do not think as we do. They find strength in conditions that should, by all logical measures, break them." As the blue planet receded in his viewport, Commander Zaxvor clutched the small metal disc the humans had given him. For the first time in his distinguished military career, he sincerely hoped the hegemony would heed his warning. The alternative, underestimating these strange, resilient creatures, would be a mistake no one in the Thelicoid civilization might live to regret.